For me, there's nothing about summer that doesn't include rooftops, rosé, and Luke's Lobster's rolls. Most business schools try to teach you how to maximize profit margins. Exactly the opposite. 42 global locations generating over 60 million in revenue that proves every MBA textbook wrong. You literally chose the hardest way possible and the most expensive way to do business. Why?
That's where people really get it wrong. They think that they have to choose either purpose or profit. That's actually a pathway to make less profit long term. We see particularly younger consumers, the younger millennials, Gen Z folks really prioritizing the values of a company. 2020 was pretty close to losing everything. I should be honest, which is I was broke. The writing career wasn't exactly going super well. The number one thing I would tell CEOs is the benefits of working on something like climate change are going home at night, looking your children in the eye, and feeling like you're doing something that's going to make it more likely that they'll live out their days on this planet and that you will sleep better at night because of that. That's a start.
What is one piece of advice that you would say is absolute bullshit?
I think the advice that I would give is not to forget profit.
Summer means a few things to me. One is rosé, rooftops, the Hamptons, and of course, Luke's Lobster. Most business schools teach you to maximize profit margins. Conniff and Luke did the exact opposite. He flies every manager to Maine to be on the lobster boats at a massive expense. He builds his own $150,000 per day processing facility when buying wholesale would have been cheaper. And he chose the most expensive supply chain possible to stay true to his main roots. The results? They speak for themselves. 42 global locations generating 60 million in revenue that prove every MBA textbook wrong about purpose versus profit. You can have both. Ben, let's start with the truth that makes most investors uncomfortable. You deliberately chose the hardest, most expensive way to do business. Why?
Well, I think first, to allay the fears of those investors, we actually make more profit by doing this. And that's where people really get it wrong. They think that they have to choose either purpose, either treating their suppliers and their team and their environment the right way, or profit. And that the only way to make a profit is to really screw over the other stakeholders in your business so that you can line your and your investors' pockets. That's actually a pathway to make less profit long term. We might make a buck early on, but your business is going to be weak because your stakeholders won't care about it. They won't give it their best every day. They won't treat you well because you're not treating them well, and your profits will diminish. So the reason that we choose to make sometimes expensive decisions to do right by our stakeholders is that is what's going to make the biggest profit for Luke's Lobster in the long term. And we don't want to own this business for 1 year. We want to own it for a lifetime. And at the same time, it's what's going to give us a livable environment and community where we can actually enjoy the fruits of our labor. If we don't start doing what's right by our environment, we're going to be gone in a flood or a wildfire anyway. So how are we going to enjoy those profits that we're theoretically prioritizing? If we don't do right by our community, then we're not going to have people around us that care about us and that we care about. And that's what makes our life worth living. So making the hard decisions, making sometimes expensive decisions really does right for us and our business on every front.
It reminds me of the concept that it takes money to make money. But going ahead and honing in on that a little bit, do you see that there's a change also in stakeholders and consumer behavior around companies that are doing the
We see particularly younger consumers, the younger millennials, Gen Z folks really prioritizing the values of a company. And because there's so many tools with which you can look behind the curtain now, they want those values to be backed up with proof and with facts. And if you don't align with the values that they care about, then they don't want to support your business. Now, granted, it's not everybody and people aren't perfect. Sometimes there's still spending money in places that aren't necessarily good for the world, but they're trying and they're paying attention. And businesses that are prioritizing the right things are starting to be rewarded.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. Thinking about it, from answering a Craigslist ad to 42 locations across 3 countries, walk me through the numbers that really matter in all of them.
I mean, what matters most goes beyond the numbers. It's really the people that matters most. So, whether that's the first person we brought on to help us run that first restaurant, or the 10 people who were there on day one that really made it work, that didn't have a lot of experience but had a lot of heart and creativity and were willing to speak up and give their input on how to make it work. Or it's, hitting that first 100, 200, 300, 400 team members that are the ones who are the face of Luke's Lobster for anyone who walks into one of our restaurants or our shacks, who are the folks who do the lobster picking, back on the boats, the folks who do the lobstering itself. It's those people that really make this business go. And, numbers when it comes to revenue and profit are generated by people. And I think, everybody who's listening has probably gone to a restaurant before. They've probably gone into a restaurant where they walk in and are immediately showered with good vibes, and a restaurant where they walk in and it smells like somebody, sorry, not smells, but feels like somebody just farted in the room. That all comes from whether or not the people who work in that business are being treated well, appreciated, feel like they have a good community among their coworkers. And if that happens, then you walk into a business that feels vibrant, where you want to be. And if it doesn't happen, there's stale air and you absolutely want to turn around and walk out the door. And that's revenue. That feeling that makes you want to stay and spend money, that's revenue. And it doesn't happen with a team that's disengaged.
I'm a New Yorker where bad service is kind of art for the course. And so there's places that have real great service. Despite the quality of the food, I'm going to keep going back because I enjoy the engagement, the environment, and the customer service that I get. Fortunately for you, you have great food and great service. So, that's a winning model in New York, and a unicorn. Really thinking about it, every successful founder, despite whether they want to acknowledge it or not, has had a moment where they've almost lost everything. You mentioned, I believe in one of your interviews, that in 2012, the business kind of kept you up at night. Can you walk us through what happened and what kind of tough decisions had to be made?
In 2012, I'll rewind a bit. Our whole business model when we started in 2009 was based on the fact that Luke's father had decades of experience in the seafood industry and was running Maine's premier lobster processor. So we were able to get the world's best lobster meat direct from the processor, shipped into our shacks to put in a bun. And that was a very simple process, but it relied on these perfect ingredients. And in 2012, when Jeff told us that he wanted to exit that business, we needed to figure out whether we were okay just going to the open market, where we didn't have that direct tie into our supplier of seafood, or whether we were going to invest a ton of capital and a ton of time and energy into starting our own processing business so that we would have direct connection to the fishermen and direct control over our product quality. And we chose the latter, despite knowing that that was going to be a huge investment, a risk, and a lot of difficulty. So that was what we did. And in 2013, we opened our own processing facility. And it was extremely long days, sleepless nights, travel back and forth between New York and Maine, sometimes both directions within one day. And all those miles on the road and that big investment that we made really paid off, because we were able to promise to our guests as we grew more and more locations that we had control over where their seafood came from and how it was handled, all the way from the boat to their plate.
I think that's amazing. I think building out that vertical supply chain and making sure very cool is something, and a lot of businesses don't do. And really, I think face when COVID hit around supply chains. Did you ever, come close to losing everything? And it really, what was your mentality? You go, like, what were you thinking?
For anybody in the restaurant industry or the seafood industry, 2020 was pretty close to losing everything. Absolutely. And most of our revenue still comes from our shacks and restaurants, and to have all of them close virtually overnight at a time that's actually particularly tough for our industry, where we are super low on cash coming out of the winter, where we burned up a lot of cash, kind of storing inventory for the off season of fishing, and we still have inventory left to get through between March and May when fishing really picks up again. So low on cash, high on inventory, and no business. Early 2020 was terrifying. And I think what really kept us going was the team that we were working with and their ingenuity and their commitment to figuring out how to make this work, how to get through it. And also all of the connections around our community that stepped up to support us. So we quickly pivoted. We started a direct-to-consumer business online that Megan and Lauren, who are heads of marketing and at that time our culinary director, built from scratch this business that allowed us to take some of that inventory, sell it D2C, ship it around the country, and get the cash in the door that we needed. And then we had folks in our community who stepped up and actually made connections with various philanthropic contributors who wanted to make sure that we were able to continue moving seafood from the fishermen so they could keep fishing through our supply chain and out to consumers. So we had support from Island Institute here locally in Maine, who connected us with Builders Initiative, which is a big philanthropic organization that supports the marine economy. And that helped us stay afloat until we could get the restaurants reopened in the summertime, get the outdoor dining set up, do everything safely for our team and for our guests, and start to get the wheel turning on the restaurant side of the business as well. But yeah, those couple of months were just, it was like day one startup again. We were just working nonstop, totally exhausted, very afraid, a lot of emotions, and we were there for each other. We were not afraid to let those emotions flow, and to pick each other up when one of us was really struggling. And that's what got us through.
Absolutely. I find that, there's no diamond without pressure. And even once you get that, then it still requires polish. And unfortunately, that means that you butt up against some rough surfaces as you go along. And so I like that you understood the ripple effect of what it meant for not only yourself and your company, but also the community and a larger system that depended upon, Lobster's pivoting a little bit. You have a very comfortable, semi-comfortable life as in writing. Why risk everything on Lobster Voice? What hunger really drove you to bet on your future on Maine fishermen that you never met? It's kind of like the reverse Anthony Bourdain right here.
I should be honest and just correct a little bit about that, which is I was broke. The writing career wasn't exactly going super well. I was 2 years out of college, almost 2 years out of college, and trying to break into an industry that was really struggling, where there were not a lot of jobs, and where I just didn't have enough connections or enough experience to kind of make my way. It was hard. And I also found at a certain point that I didn't have the will to keep doing it because I didn't love it the way I thought I was going to. I didn't enjoy sitting at a computer, writing, emailing off articles on spec, hoping somebody would reply, applying to unpaid internship after unpaid internship because that was legal back then, and then not being able to pay my rent on the back end. But most of all, I just found that I wanted to shut my computer and cook. That was what really made me happy. Writing was not. And that was why I started going on Craigslist and looking for restaurant jobs. And I expected it to play out very differently. I expected to take a counter service job or a dishwasher job and work my way up through that industry and figure out a path along the way. And I actually couldn't get any of those jobs. Nobody responded. I mean, we were the depths of the Great Recession, and dining was struggling, and there just weren't a lot of jobs available, and I was not who they wanted. Then I saw a post from a guy who grew up in the lobster industry and was now in banking and had this idea to start an authentic Maine style lobster shack, which I had visited when I was a kid, when my family got to come to Maine, and held a ton of nostalgia and romance for me, as well as just, an appreciation for the amazing quality of the food that I'd gotten there when I was a kid. And I think really it was that love that I had for those memories that convinced Luke to hire me. He wanted somebody who was passionate above all, more so than somebody with restaurant experience.
I think we're about the same age and graduated. We were on the same age of the break section. So I feel your pain there. Thinking about that, what was the moment, after you got hired by me, to go ahead and take this on, but you understood or knew that this was going to be bigger than even your estimates? What did you see that others really had missed?
A lot of it was just from the line on day one when we opened. I mean, all of the established knowledge was that it was going to take quite a while to build awareness and to build sales, and that we needed to buckle down and have everything be super bootstrapped, which it was. And that hopefully in time people would recognize us and start to come enough that we would have sales. And instead, we got a lot of press out of the gate. And on opening day, we had a line around the block. And so it was a big shock for us, but it told us that what we were doing was really resonating with people. And yes, it was about people love lobster, and there wasn't a lot of places to get good lobster, and there was nowhere to get an authentic lobster roll. But it was more than that. It was, this was the Great Recession, and this was somebody that was trying to make a luxury product more accessible without sacrificing quality. It was a business that was focused on sustainable seafood at a time that people were just learning what that was. Somebody who was going back to his seafood roots after a stint in banking. And believe it or not, bankers weren't that popular in 2009. So I think we were well aligned with the zeitgeist in terms of what got us going day one, but it was really delivering on the promise of the world's best lobster roll and treating people the way they wanted to be treated that got us past day one, day two, and into month 2, month 3, when we thought, oh, wow, this is sustaining. We should open a second location.
I think the question that most people don't answer when you're talking about that, because before opening day and before the press releases, you're kind of spinning into the void. There's nobody there to support you because nobody knows what you're doing. Can you tell me what the personal cost by choosing that harder path and that dark period of time where you don't have anything, you don't know whether it's going to succeed or not? What did that look like for you?
You could compare it to college classmates who were in consulting jobs at the time, or who were going to go to business school or law school and kind of had it all figured out. Not their full life's future, but at least, the well-trodden pathway from school to what they were going to do next. And, I certainly had, before Luke started and after Luke started, so many of those sleepless nights where I was just trying to figure out how to survive. And at the same time, I guess I've never been built for that well-trodden path or really for that degree of certainty. It's just not it's not true to who I am and to what I want. And I feel alive in those moments where I'm pushed creatively to figure it out, even under duress. And I found it just much more stimulating to be in that position where, yes, times are hard, but I can rely on myself, my creativity, my ingenuity, and the people around me who I always work hard to build community with, to know that things were going to work out okay. And, through a mixture of work and luck, that wound up being the case.
I'm constantly reminded that the one thing about life that is guaranteed is none of us are making it out of luck. And so it's the journey that really matters, and people that you have the ability to go ahead and help along the way that really goes out and map this. You created what I call the Maine model. It's really kind of this concept in my mind around authentic regional culture scaled global without losing its soul or its essence. Can you really break down your framework for doing that, and which everyone else said was impossible, and why did you do it?
I think that a lot of it was sort of defining what that culture meant to us, what we wanted it to be, and leaving it open enough that it can be inclusive of folks who don't have that background and that inherent knowledge that Luke and I had when we started. So what are the defining principles that can feel universal, even if you haven't spent time on a dock in Maine? And so, again, at the very beginning, that was just quality, make the world's best lobster roll, treat people the way they want to be treated. And then we sort of defined more of what that meant over time. So part of quality for us is the absolute commitment to sustainable fisheries and to supporting fishermen and women who are doing it right, who are treating their natural resources the right way, who aren't damaging their ecosystem. Part of it is the investment in every person who handles that product along the way, making sure that they're well treated. And part of it is simplicity. It's making sure that when so much work and cost goes into your base ingredient, you're not over grilling it. You're letting people taste the lobster or whatever other seafood we work with. That has to be the star of the show, and covering it up is a no-no in our business. And I think that level of simplicity, authenticity, transparency, and dependability goes beyond just how we see our seafood. It's our interactions with our team, our interactions with our guests. And we do tie that back to what we see as characteristics of maybe an idealized version, but of Maine, of folks who say what they mean, who mean what they say, who stand by their commitments, who treat people the right way, and who present their work, whether it's fishing or something totally different, in an honest, transparent way. We think that those can be universal values that can still accommodate for whether it's, members of our team or it's guests who have completely different cultures and life experiences that we want to welcome and embrace.
I really appreciate that. And of course, this is the No BS podcast for leaders that actually get it. So that obviously resonates with me, but also I am a big proponent of diversity and inclusion because it makes us better. It's more profitable. It opens up the scope. So, dynamically across not only our communities, but also across the world. Will you tell me about the first time you ever had to go to a bank, get VC money or anything like that, or you had to present it, and how did you feel, and what was your fit?
We were blessed enough to be able to bootstrap and to grow organically from 2009 until 2016. That was a thrilling time. It was a ton of work. It continues to be a ton of work, but We decided around 2015 that in order for us to grow the restaurant business at the pace we wanted to and still support that lobster processing business and all of the capital intensity of being vertically integrated in the seafood supply chain, it would help to have a capital infusion. So we were not in a place where it was like, oh my God, our burn rate is such and such, and we're going to run out of money. We've always been profitable, and we've always been able to support some growth in the company. But that was in a moment where we were feeling like we could do more. We could have a greater impact if we grew quicker. When we went out to speak to investors in 2015 and 2016, the emphasis was, on the fundamentals of the business, of course, the simplicity that we had in our model, it's a labor light model in most of our locations. It takes very few people to make lobster rolls in the very small spaces that we were occupying. The numbers were super compelling. I mean, people just really love really good lobster and being treated nicely. That was a compelling picture. But I think already, this was before we got into B Corp certification or anything like that, we were already emphasizing very heavily our commitment to sustainability and to doing business the right way, and to the growing trend among, at that time, millennials who were coming into their purchasing power to support businesses that were values aligned. Our pitch to investors was, your investments in restaurants or other businesses that are not doing good for the world are going to start to suffer. And you should be looking at businesses that consumers will feel really good about and proud spending their money with and proud going to work for. And that was a compelling pitch. And that was, put us in a position to get that investment and get that capital that we needed to propel growth, not just in restaurant count, but also the diversification of the seafood business. Because a couple of years later, we were actually able to launch our CPG business. And now, we have branded seafood products in supermarkets all over the country. And that was another big thing that actually got us through COVID. Yeah. So it was the right time to make that move. As hard as it is to get distracted from running your business and go ask for money instead, it was a good decision, and it paid off.
Right. I'm going to throw out a random question just because I feel like most people that have friends that are also going to ABC Wells. What was one question that caught you off guard that you still remember to this day?
I think I was surprised initially in those conversations by how few people understood the wisdom of vertical integration, or they misunderstood it. There were some folks who naively thought, oh, you're vertically integrated. That means your cost of goods must be really low because you own more parts of the supply chain. So for those folks, we had to disabuse them of that notion and say, no, it's not saving us any money. It's costing us more money. But here are the things that are so important about it for protecting quality, protecting our consumers, and ensuring longevity of the business. For others, it was, wow, you're unfocused. This is a waste of time and energy. You should just be opening restaurants and you should just be buying lobster from distributors. And that was just missing the mark by such a huge degree, to think that we could just be a commodity business with no connection to our sourcing, and that it wasn't so key for our first 7 years of financial success to have that ability to go directly to the source and protect the seafood all the way through. That was just, it was wrong. And so we were very picky about who we wound up letting into the business, because it had to be somebody who understood that vertical integration didn't mean like, oh, great, now we can bang down the price on our suppliers and really make all sorts of more short-term cash, but who understood why it was a critical investment to make for the success of the company.
Well, I hope that most of Wall Street now knows that, Maine Lobster is its own branded trademark and very desirable thing, just like propane honey or many other products out there in the world. That protect their source and understand sustainability, supply chains that we're into. So let's go ahead and kind of think about, let's talk about what responsible business actually costs, not the PR versions, but the real numbers.
If you're just looking at the exact same number of people in a business model and you pay those people $5 more per hour than somebody else, I mean, that's a very real cost addition, right? There's no getting around it. When you pay people an honest wage and you're competing against people that pay minimum wage, that's a cost. Now, how do you watch that cost and figure out how to mitigate it and how to make a return on the investment that you are making in people that leads to greater revenue and greater profit? Well, first of all, you can mitigate it by having a simple business model and being creative about your labor costs and where you need to have people and where you don't. So, not introducing complex menu items that require more and more people to make basically the same total revenue is a way to be able to pay all those people that you do hire a better wage. Then figuring out how you get a return on that investment, well, rather than just analyze what people's upfront labor costs are, they should also be analyzing their turnover costs. Figuring out how frequently people leave their business, how much their business suffers while they're understaffed, and how much it costs them to bring in new people, retrain those people. The intangible piece of how bad are the experiences that your guests have, either A, when you're understaffed because you've lost somebody, or when you have a team that's struggling because they're underpaid and doesn't like working there. Those are real costs to your top line and therefore to your bottom line when you do a bad job presenting your product because your team is underpaid. So we need to think holistically about something like labor cost and understand the benefits of engagement and longevity from your team when you treat them the right way. Similarly, you have guests who really value the fact that you're making investments in the ecosystem to serve a low carbon footprint product, to continually make that carbon footprint lower, to serve a product that's not overfished, that's not harvested in ways that are socially irresponsible. And because you're able to tell that story, that's going to increase your revenue because people are going to come back over and over again because they feel good about where they're spending their money. Any of these areas, you could say like, oh, that's a higher cost. But there are ways to make that higher cost work for you. And there are ways to mitigate it with waste reduction. We increased the cost of our disposable products when we made them all compostable. And we also instituted behaviors that reduce the number of those products that we use. Because now we are packing more efficiently. We're actually asking people if they need to go wares that they may not need if they're walking back to their apartment. It's very simple to enact sustainability changes that save you money at the same time as you're making small additional investments here and there to make your business and your products more sustainable.
I really wish that more people understood the marginality of that and how those trade-offs usually lead to larger profits. I really wanted to know who inspired you to follow this, profits for purpose model. Like, who did you look up to in the industry, the business, or the globe that really kind of led the way and said that this is possible?
I mean, I think hearing the story about Steve Ells and the big change he made at Chipotle to commit to using more sustainable ingredients and seeing that that was not the way he launched his business, that wasn't the principle he had in mind when he just wanted to start making burritos, but he learned in his time in the food industry about some of the huge problems the industry has and about the importance of sustainability. He made a hard choice to change how he sourced. Now, I haven't tracked exactly what Chipotle is up to these days, but that story really resonated with me because I always cared about the environment, but I was not very active in working on sustainability, and I did not understand the role that our food really plays in sustainability and in life on Earth for the future when we started Luke's. And it was the exposure to the industry that helped me understand both its ills and also some of the great opportunities to support good actors in food. And so we've become better and better over time. You know, we weren't born perfect sustainability advocates, and we're not perfect sustainability advocates today. But seeing examples like Steve Ells realize that and make a pivot and do so despite people telling him it wasn't a good idea was inspirational.
I think there's a famous quote, we don't need, 100 people doing it perfectly, 10,000 doing it imperfect, right? To go out and change the world and get us closer to the, 2C, point of no return. Switching gears just a little bit, you went from, as you said, broke in New York, which really is about a 30,000-ish type salary, to really overseeing over $150,000 daily in lobster processing. I'd really like to know more about you then, which is, let's talk about the transformation cost for you personally as you made these decisions over and over to not only your family, your friends, but also yourself.
Taking on the $35,000 job to start Luke's was an increase in pay for me. So it was actually a boon, landing that job where I could actually tell my roommates that I wasn't going to be stretched on the rent the next month. And I guess in the context of, people thinking about successful entrepreneurs, I've never been super ambitious about money. I've never wanted to be rich. I think when I grew up and started to have a conception of money, like the idea that somebody could make over $100,000 was wild for me to imagine. And so I think when I talk about like, oh, well, like, you're not rich like other people that have been on How I Built This. And that was a question that Kyra asked actually, 7 years ago, and I'm still not rich and I still don't care. like I own a house. Like it's kind of like to be 40 these days and own a house, like you have to be kind of rich. So I think it's all relative. Like, yeah, by How I Built This terms, I've like theoretically made some financial sacrifice and I'm not out, hitting it big, but like I have more than I need to survive. I have more than I imagined I would have growing up. And, spiritually, I am fulfilled because I'm doing work that matters and that makes me feel like there's a reason for me to get up in the morning and that my community is benefiting for the work that I'm doing. And so, not being super rich is not a big deal.
Like, all right, Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and Elon, they already have an espresso oil. So that's absolutely fair enough. Kind of digging in again on that personal path, which is, have you ever woke up and questioned the decision that you made all those years ago? Or even the decision that you continue today?
I think what makes me question the path is kind of the same thing that has for over 10 years now, which is just that I tend to be someone who gets really excited about new ideas. And there's so much going on in the sustainable economy, whether it's the marine economy, in the food and beverage world, in so many things that I witness that like really excite me. As I mentioned, a core principle of Luke's is keeping it simple and not throwing a bunch of changes into the equation that aren't necessary. So, there's parts of this business that don't jive with like what my internal gears tell me to do, which is like always go pursue a hot new idea that's super exciting. And Luke has some of that too. And, there are times that our team has gotten very frustrated with us because they feel like we're chasing shiny objects and we need to like walk it back and say, hey, remember, we focus on Perfect Lobster. So I think that's what makes me question. It's always just that like I do have this itch to take on new things, new projects, and explore different industries. And I also, for my personal health, need to figure out how to suppress some of that instinct because I can easily take on way too much, get too distracted, and I have a whole life outside of work. I have an 11-month-old baby now and a wife, and I need to be making time for that side of me as well. So that makes me think that this continues to be the right path, even if there are all these things around me that get me super excited that I want to pursue.
It's all right. I may have slight ADHD, so I am with you on that. I have to constantly remind myself that what's trendy is not who I am. At the core, it's really what's traditional and kindness. Well, I really think that you figured out something that others really have, which is purpose isn't a marketing strategy. It's really about, right? The deeper your cultural authenticity, the harder it is to replicate, right? Would you consider that this is also the same case?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, maybe a year ago, I got some outreach from a larger company who wanted to sit down and asked if I could have an advisory conversation about sustainability. I said, sure, would love that. Would love to, impart any knowledge I have that can make a company more sustainable. And, their first question was, how can we enact some kind of sustainability strategy for our business? And I looked around the Zoom, and every person from their side in the Zoom had marketing in their title. And I said, well, the first thing you can do is get your CEO here, or somebody from operations, or somebody other than marketing, because if this is just a marketing ploy, then people are going to see right through it. You're not going to actually do anything good for sustainability, and the whole thing's going to be a farce and a flop. Yeah, if it's not core to your culture at the deepest founder CEO level, then it's really going to backfire. Because people are going to understand that it's not really what you're about.
I think you touched on something that 90% of companies are really getting wrong around, focus-driven businesses. I know that you just not too long ago got your B Corp certification, and it's become a green flash thing. But honestly, what 3 things that they're really doing? C-suite, not trickle down. Not everybody can be native, or they can make the transition.
The biggest thing for me about B Corp certification is that I had no appreciation for paperwork before B Corp certification. I still don't love it in a lot of ways. But the reality is when something isn't a policy that's on paper, that's signed, and that people can see, this like ethereal feeling that you have of sustainable sourcing isn't real. And as you grow and you have somebody across the country making a decision about buying a product or not buying a product, you're not there whispering in their ear about how to make that decision. So if you don't have policies that are disseminated that people are trained on, and then if you don't measure impacts of what you're doing and report out to folks on what they're doing, it's not going to work. It's not going to persist. Long term, you're going to revert to just being an average old business. So B Corp has given me a major appreciation for measurement, for paperwork, for policies, that like my instinct is just to be like, let's just get stuff done. And that can work if you're a startup with a few employees that you see each other every day at the office. But as you grow, formality is really important. The other great thing about the B Corp certification is that there's been a minimum to get in, and then there's been all the questions that you did not answer for maximum score. All of those points left on the table, and that creates a pathway for you 3 years from now when you recertify to be able to get a lot better as a business. So 2018, when we first certified, we basically did no climate work and no inclusion work whatsoever. And the entire basis of our certification was that we treated our team well and we served sustainable seafood. And we did a lot of things in those two arenas that got us to that minimum score. But since then, the work that we've been able to do to make our business and our industry more inclusive and to measure and actively manage our carbon footprint and our waste footprint, a lot of that was just triggered by all those questions that we didn't have the right answer to in 2018, but have started to answer in better ways now.
As someone who consult a number of them used to call CRS, right? Corporate responsibility, right? There's a couple of things that still, I think, carry over. Here's the new generation around sustainability, which is if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't matter. And this goes for everything from social justice all the way through to environmental impact, carbon footprints, so forth and so on. And the second part is, I think that you don't know what, so if you don't think of, those questions, you don't know to ask them yourself and to go ahead and to be able to answer them and to create, systems of change around those things. Because I think leads right into the next question that I really have for you, which was around you transitioning from the day-to-day operations of Luke's Lobsters to Lift All Boats Foundation. And that's really moving from profit first to really purpose first, with what we call long tail of that return on profits, right? So, what did you see coming that makes this transition not only necessary, but makes sense and also adds to your legacy?
Very briefly, what Lift All Boats does is we have recognized that the lobster industry in Maine feels very closed off to most people, because to get into it, you need to do 1,000 apprentice hours fishing, signed off by currently licensed fishermen. There's only between 4,000 and 5,000 currently licensed fishermen in the state. And if you do those 1,000 hours, you still have to sit on a 14-year wait list to get your ultimate license, unless you do those 1,000 hours as part of this student license program, which requires you start before your 18th birthday and finish before your 23rd birthday if you go to college, or your 20th birthday if you don't. And so the only people who even know that program exists is current fishermen and their kids. So the only people that really have a shot at getting a commercial lobster license are the close connections of fishermen. But what we noticed is, not only is there a huge community of people here in Maine who just don't have that access, who might love lobstering, but didn't have the opportunity to even try it or even dream of a career in it, there also aren't enough current industry insiders who are young that are pursuing that path anymore. So there's a lot of fishermen right now that don't have the young folks to work on their boat that they need to go out and fish safely. So it's harming people on both ends. What Lift All Boats does is we offer that insider connection and some of that training and education to folks from communities that are not connected to the ocean. We go into high schools, we explain to them how fun and lucrative and hardworking, but amazing a career lobstering can be. We get them that student license. We get them to sign off from licensed lobstermen. We teach them how to fish. We give them their own gear. We buy their catch at market price. They learn about supply and demand. We give them a bunch of wraparound education about how climate is impacting the waters, about personal financial management. And generally, we aim to get to a place where more folks in our broader community feel like they belong on the water. And, we do that because it's the right thing to do. Because, our name Lift All Boats stems from the phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats. And we honestly believe that doing work that benefits these young people who come from communities who are disadvantaged actually lifts all the boats of everyone in the existing industry, because they have that workforce available to them they didn't have before, and because the diversity that comes with bringing new entrants into this industry brings fresh new ideas and perspectives that help us work on the challenges that our fishery is going to face over the coming years. The long tail of profit is creating a resilient industry that's built for the future, that has the young people joining that it needs to continue, as well as just the fact that people that eat at Luke's or buy our products in the supermarket believe in this work and they love it, and they show up and they buy lobster rolls because they want to support it. And that's a really big deal. When the media talks about this project, or we put it on our social media, and they see young people speaking to the fact that they never dreamed of an opportunity like this, and now they have it, and how much that's impacted them in their development as teenagers, that makes people want to interact with our business. And that's what it's all about. You give people reasons to want to spend money with you. And the primary way to do that is to know that their money is going to get put back into the community in a way that benefits people that need it.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer, plant the tree and you may never see the tree, but the shade will be there for the generations to come. As we think about the evolution of capitalism towards stakeholder primacy, why or what would you tell the next generation of CEOs who are purpose native how climate change forces business models to evolve? And what are the competitive advantages of early movers?
The number one thing I would tell CEOs is the benefits of working on something like climate change are going home at night, looking your children in the eye, and feeling like you're doing something that's going to make it more likely that they'll live out their days on this planet, and that you will sleep better at night because of that. So that's a start.
What about the ones with the bucket?
Beyond that, I think if you're not taking steps now to mitigate the impacts of climate change, you're going to be really susceptible both to shareholder action in the future, to customers walking away from your business because you're not doing your part, because you're part of the problem and not part of the solution. And there are just so many exciting opportunities to get involved in new ideas and new technologies that will become huge tools that people use to mitigate climate change in the future. And there's also some really unexciting but compelling ways to do that. And that means, again, measuring how much you use on your utility bills, figuring out how to convert your usage to green energy in a way that uses buying power to actually save you money, figuring out whether you really need to use all those disposable containers that wind up in the garbage and take carbon emissions to make and take carbon emissions to destroy. There's dollars attached to all of that. And if you're proactively managing emissions and waste, you are more likely to save money than you are to spend extra money.
Following up on that is, home CEOs, right, that think that they can't afford to operate responsibly. What's your response to that?
You can't afford not to. Again, I would say, start with looking at where you're wasting money by wasting product, by wasting energy, and start with the improvements that will clearly save you money. Then take a look at the extra money that you have in your bank account and you can think about how to invest that in more strategies that help you feel like you're doing the right thing and help your team and help your customers feel like they're doing the right thing. Because again, it's how people want to spend their money. It's also how they want to spend their working lives. People don't want to go to work for a company that's not doing the right thing. And they don't want to spend the money they made at work at a company that's not doing the right thing. So long term, you can't afford not to do it because people are going to walk away from your business, whether that's your workers or it's your customers.
That's fantastic. And so I have just a couple more questions before we wrap up here. This is going to be a split question. What is one piece of advice that you get to future purpose native, leaders? These are the ones that are starting off in college. And then the second part is from your years of experience post college and in the real world, what is one piece of advice that you would say is absolute bullshit?
I think the advice that I would give is not to forget profit. I think that, as much as I can talk about the importance of being able to look your kids in the eye and sleep well at night, as a business, none of it happens without some profit. You need to make sure that you are making decisions that do allow the gears to turn in your business. And every stakeholder that depends on your business depends on you making a profit. So you cannot expect to be perfect overnight. And you do need to have a functional business that has profit or has a reasonable pathway to profit within the burn rate of the money that you have. And if you don't, you're going to wind up letting people down. So we need to be talking about purpose and profit together and how they feed one another, and not let either one exist in isolation of the other if we're going to be a business that's going to last. So remember to keep that in mind, and remember to use all of the accomplishments you're making from a purpose perspective. Tell those stories, talk to your team about them, get your team's feedback and involvement in them so that you get that increased engagement, and then you get that increased customer engagement so that it feeds the profit of your business. I think the advice that I would say is total bullshit is, the idea that you need to be constantly up at all hours of the night doing nothing but your business, and that there is not going to be time for you to step away and care for your own well-being. There are going to be times in your business that that's true. But if you set up your entire business and working life on the idea that you're going to be doing nothing but work, if you're afraid to take a week's vacation, you're going to burn out so hard. And even if you don't completely burn out, you're going to be working worse than you would be if you found ways to take that separation and get rejuvenated. Mm-hmm. And I also think if you're someone that's building a team and you can't separate yourself from the business for a week, then you're not doing a good job developing people. You're not building trust between yourself and your team. And you're putting your business in a very precarious and I would say crippled position. As a leader, you need to continually be finding ways to make yourself redundant so that you can pursue the next step up, and so that you can take that time away and reflect and rest. So, yes, get through those times where you're chugging away over 100 hours a week and that's all you can do. But you need to have eyes on those times when you've built people up and they can run the business when you're not engaged, and you need to turn off your phone and turn off your email and go touch some grass. It's really important.
Like it's something, a couple of years as well as more of my time that it's something for Fortune 500. I think one of the most important things is to trust the team that you build. Because if you trust yourself that you make the right decisions, and that is really hard for most leaders to let go that authority to allow for autonomy. And where can executives learn more about implementing work frameworks in their organizations, and a little bit more about our, audience that wants to know how to contribute and participate in, your photographic activities and in Maine in general.
Lift All Boats is going to have its own website by the end of the year, now that we're on 501c3. But for now, you can find more about it on the Luke's Lobster website, lukeslobster.com. And you can find out a lot more about the work we do in sustainability there as well. I'd highly recommend just checking out bcorporation.net, learning more about the B Corp framework, how that's built, and what it could mean for your organization. And yeah, generally keep your ear to the ground on podcasts like this that really cover business from a perspective that values stakeholders, because those are the businesses that are going to make it long term, and they're the businesses that are going to make you feel like it's worth showing up to work every day.
I want to thank you, Ben, from the bottom of my heart, not just for being on the podcast, but as an individual, a person, and a community leader, all the work that you're really doing, and even to your family, because, the next generation also matters immensely. If you like what you heard, and of course, from leaders who tell the real truth about money, power, influence, and failure, as well as resilience, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, leave a comment. Until next time, stay driven in purpose. I'm Tiffany Hart. I'm the Hello.